Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service, here again to present today the new moon of May 16th, 2026. We're going to be using Washington, D.C. So we're going to look at first the pizza pie chart because it's really relevant, and we'll get to this. It's a very active chart. So the very first thing I want to say is that even according to my notes, one of the first things that it talks about is that it is not a light or temporary cycle. In other words, this is kind of going to be a little heavy, and um, it's going to be the beginning of some permanent things. That's what this chart promises us, and we'll get to that. But let's look at the pizza pie chart. First off, I'm going to point out that when comparing oh, it's perfect. Okay. When sometimes you compare these two charts, this one doesn't always come up with the same ascendant midheaven. It did this time, thank God. But in with regards to that, Gary did tell me he thought solar fire was better. So just an FYI there. I'm kind of thinking that the chart, um, the new moon charts and the full moon charts might be more accurate. Just my thoughts. Now, what we're looking at is a 25, 57, or almost 26 degrees for the sun and the moon, and they're in the eighth house. Okay, so I'm going to just do a little snippet for DC area. And what that means is there is an accent on combined resources. Okay. Now, what you can't see, and that means in any situation, like if you're working for a company, it's more about their resources and how their resources compare to your resources. Like, for example, are you getting paid enough? Or is the company in so much trouble that it's affecting your ability to make pay, to make bonuses, etc. Now, with this, and I'll get to this later, but Ceres is also at 25 degrees. So Ceres is right here. So that's also in that eighth house. And Ceres is our ability to nurture ourselves, to be able to take care of ourselves, but also to take care of our children, our aging parents. So Ceres is that nurturing concept, but it's also nutrition. And the idea of food could play out in some of what's going on in the United States at this time. Okay, so there's a lot to think about with just that connection, and that's not the only one. When I get to the 360 dial again, you'll really see it. So a couple things I'm going to mention here. First of all, Hades to Cupido, all right? That does not bode well for organizations, for families. There's a lot of deterioration, maybe within even groups, maybe socially. There's been some deterioration, but the Hades does not bode well there. Okay. I don't know if I can do it in here. I guess I can. It's basically talking about poverty. It's talking about how things are sorrowful. It talks about supplies and supply chains. And it also refers to the concept of how people are going to have to hoard. I know I like that word, but stock. And that bodes well for pantries in the basement. It bodes well for it also bodes well for companies that have some issues. So it's not just about households, although that's a big deal, but it's regarding the economy as well, the businesses. Now, here is a direct, and this is really, Zeus is really not just in an inconjunct to the 25 degrees here, okay, because you see it's Libra, it's not like an opposition. Actually, I guess it would be more of a sextile, I believe, but it's really an inconjunct. Okay, because Libra is next to Scorpio, which would be the opposite. So I'm going to look at this as a major inconjunction or semi-square, and basically that's also referring to even this necessity to uh, to, to like really kind of, I want to almost say push back, or to set yourself up, or to recognize that there is a lot going on and we've got to do something about it. Okay. And this could also be the military for that matter. And the same, where they have to, again, especially because Cirrus is there. Okay. And I've heard rumors that there is a problem with feeding the military. Not good, America, not good. But I'm going to move on to the 360 chart. I think that the other thing, this is in retrograde, and so is this. This is another thing that kind of indicates that there could be some issues financially. You're going to find out, I think some businesses are doing very well because, of course, they are gouging us all over the place. But I think that a lot of that truth is going to be leaking out. We're not living in an age where you can keep things secret anymore. If we haven't figured that out, we're not paying attention. So here we're going to look at the 360 dial. There we go. So here we have the 360 dial, and I'm going to put this on the Aries point, one of them. We're going to look at both of them. But I want you to see something here because this is really big. Okay. Again, Cirrus is here also. You can't see it with this program because it doesn't bring in, or I don't have those asteroids on. It gets very confusing. Now, you would think that with Jupiter there would be an expansion and it would be good. But I don't think that's what we're going to see because of the Zeus node. That's like a volatile connection or the war. Okay. So that could be what is expanding. All right, just so you're aware of it, that is something that we see. Now, the other things that I want to point out, so I'm going to bring it to here, okay, is that you have, actually, it's here that you really see it. There it is. Okay, I'd rather be here because one of the things I do when I do this kind of work is I look extensively at the Aries point and the new moon axis itself, which is what we're looking at right now. And I got to tell you that the reason why I do that is because it affects the whole world. And that way we're not isolating it to just DC, which is newsworthy in and of itself. Okay, but look at this. Volcanus, we have Cirrus not showing, Saturn. Okay, let's just talk about that for just a hot minute, okay? So the fact that the sun-moon axis itself is tied directly to Cirrus, Saturn, and Volcanus immediately tells us this is not a light or temporary cycle, as I've already said. It speaks of pressure, survival, control systems, labor, consequences, and the need to stabilize conditions. I think that's really true. We really do need to stabilize. These conditions, the reason why we have to stabilize them is because they become too strained to ignore. I mean, things are falling apart everywhere. Infrastructures are not dependable anywhere. Okay. And that I don't care whether it's your local government, whether it's the place you work, whether it's the supermarket you go to in your neighborhood. Because of the squeeze, because of the pressure, things are not operating the way that they should. Saturn and Volcanus together, that's like a guarded thing, okay? They often show a concentrated force and structural pressure and situations where endurance is tested, okay? It's also putting your guard up. I think a lot of us have our guard up. We know that nothing works, so that our assumption is, well, it's not going to work anyway. And this is going to be playing out very heavily in themes related to resources, loss, protection, economics, the food system, which I already mentioned, caregiving, the struggle to maintain stability under pressure. So let me give you a couple examples that are rather obvious because of the big ugly bill. Okay. This bill, okay, means that you now, in many cases, are going to have to take care of your elderly parents. There is no Medicaid to help. And nursing homes are going to have to shut down. They're going to have to downsize, and they're going to have to adjust to the new reality. With that said, some of us are going to have to take that parent back in. That's number one. Number two, educational systems have been raped and pillaged. Okay, so they're not what they were. So you can't, and that includes daycare. So you don't have care for your children. You don't have care for the elderly. And now what do? Let's talk about increased pressure. I think that's rather blatantly obvious. Okay. So again, our need is going to be to stabilize and make those adjustments that can no longer be postponed. We've got to do something, right? So the midpoint structure of the sun-moon axis, which I will get to in a second, really points to that. I do want to take one more brief moment to look at the other Aries point, which talks about the oppression of this war. See, right here, South Node. We've done this before. It never works. It increases the financial debt of whatever countries are involved. It's very hard on economies everywhere. It's this one in particular because the Iranians have now closed the strait, which was always open. And so there's a lot here to digest that is oppressive to us, besides the fact that they're killing our young men and women. Okay? And I know that we think that there's been 13 deaths, but I believe there's probably been more. You can't blow up all those facilities and tell me that those people are only just hurt. I think when the real numbers come out of the health facility, I think it's in Germany, I think it's going to be rather interesting. Because look, Jupiter is still kind of in that pitcher flow, and Admetus and Zeus, I'll get to Admetus in a minute. Zeus and the South Node are working together. Okay, so it really is a very oppressive situation, not to us just here in the United States, but to everyone in the world. And that has put a lot of pressure on the people. That's the Volcanus working, okay? It's also pointing out the war and our connections to the war, okay? And the fact that things are expanding. And in this case, Jupiter, remember, Jupiter's supposed to be this like benevolent planet. And it's not to say that some of us won't have opportunities right now, especially if we take them. Okay, so I'm not going to say that this is going to affect everyone the same way, but what I'm going to say, it does affect everybody. And that is the fact that the connections of these warmongers, and I'm talking, there's more than one. President of the United States is definitely one, but we also have Netanyahu, we also have Putin. And I believe those connections of the war are kind of expanding, and that is putting pressure on the people. That's my take, and that's how I'm going to say it. Now, what I'm going to do at this point is, because I do have, I think I do have some asteroids in here, I'm going to go to solar fire for the next whole rest of this video, and we're going to look at solar fire, but I always like to look at these axes too, because I think that they're very, very important in the overall picture. Like this Saturn, this Volcanus, I mean, those dots are right there. Look at Cupido. Okay, it's just, it is what it is. And the errors, this right here, this is Kronos to Sirius. That is bad judgments and bad decisions made by people in charge. Now, what's interesting is it doesn't just apply to the above leaders that I've already mentioned, but it applies to work environments. It applies to even local situations where people just are not making good decisions. I mean, look at the way they're trying to force data centers and concentration camps on us. So there's some really bad decisions, and it's oppressive to us. And it's like we just keep hearing more and more and more, and we know that things are changing as a result of what we're hearing. But again, we're only in the process of it, and when you're in the process of something, it's really hard to see how it's going to work out. So I'm going to move on to solar fire. So here we are. And of course, my charts are a lot messier to look at. But for change, we're really looking at the same ascendant and midheaven, which doesn't happen much. But I want to talk about a few things. First of all, in the midheaven of the chart for the United States, so it affects more about 7 degrees of Cancer, which is where the midheaven is right now for the United States. I can tell you that the psychic ability, the intuitive ability of most people is a lot better right now. So follow your intuition, people. It's going to be spot on. The other thing I see is a lot of emotional pain. And it could be old wounds are triggered. I think with this racism concept and what they're doing with gerrymandering is such a pain. It's such an old emotional wounding that we're all dealing with right now. And it's like one of the bad things about the karma of the United States and the fact that they're trying to reestablish it again is it's heartbreaking. It's heart-wrenching. Okay. So I did want to bring that up because I thought that was one of the most important things. The other thing that's really important, and it's out by about I'm going to say a degree and 4. In other words, it's close but not really. Is the rule breaker, and I'm going to talk about. I think the rule breaker shows up somewhere else, but one of the things I see here in the Washington chart is the rule breaker, and I definitely think that the root of what is going on is because people have not been following the rules. And we already know that's true. And if you say to me, well, who isn't following the rules? If I have to look at this chart, I see palace, and I'm going to say politics. I'm going to say straight up, it's a political thing. Okay. I can tell you that it's also causing, because of the 6th degree, and there's a lot of stuff at 6 degrees, which, by the way, does square the midheaven. There's a major square going on here with everything. So it's like this major cross. And what I'm seeing here is that there's a lot of people withdrawing from the United States. And it's going to set into motion. It makes things worse, number one, but it's also going to mean a reawakening or remaking of the rest of the world. So I did want to point those things out. I thought they were rather important. And I do want to say that there is a lot of rule breaking going on right now. It is very upsetting for most of us to watch because it's so obvious, it's rather blatant. So there's my DC short reading, and I'm going to move on now to the rest of us because that's what my stuff is really about. But I do always like to tell people that one of the reasons why politics has always been important to me is because the study of astrology can be very clearly seen if you watch what's going on in the world. So politics is a huge form of I want to say it increases your ability to study politics, but it is a politics, is astrology in motion. Okay, so if you're watching what's going on in the world, you can then relate it to the stars, and it is a wonderful learning tool. It is what I've used my whole life. So yes, I have been political my whole life. Well, let's just put it this way. I started studying astrology at the age of 9. Okay, by the age of 15, I was a radical when it came to politics. So it was just a way for me to kind of follow along with what was happening in my world. The other thing I want to say, if anybody's interested in studying astrology besides politics, study your own chart. Those are the two biggest fractions, I want to say, that will really teach you astrology, the feel, the ability to just live the experience is the best way to interpret an experience. So With that said, I want to move on, and we're going to now look at everything that affects all of us. Now, we already know, and I'm going to point out a few other things here. We already know that whatever is going on in America because of our 1 degree Libra midheaven, and that's the Sibley chart. And one day I'm going to do something maybe on the Yorkshire chart, which is basically when they won the battle, when it was really over. Not when they did the declaration, but when they actually won the declaration. So that's another lecture completely. But the idea is that whatever happens here does really affect the world. And it's kind of a sad thing in a way that we're in such a dyers and that the whole world has to suffer with us. So I feel bad with that. Now I'm going to move on to the dial. And the dial itself, we're going to start, I'm going to come back to this because you're going to find that the Aries point is pretty active again. And I'm going to actually start with the sun as my first point. Okay. And we're going to go by the minute and, oh, and we have to go to 7. There we 25:57 or 55:57. But look immediately what has been pointed out in this chart. We have a connection between Pluto and the black moon, also known as Lilith. That is a transformation that is occurring, that the United States is no longer going to be the go-to place. Quite the opposite. Just reinforces that we're being avoided. The other thing is, look at this. And this is where, the Saturn and the Cupido are. Okay. So, and again, I can go up to that 57 and Saturn and Cupido it just comes up clearer. Okay. So this is where we're going to start. Okay. This axis, and realize that, the sun and the moon and Saturn and Cupido are like connected in this chart. All right. That's collective pressure inside of organizations, governments, alliances, institutions, and social structures. Wow, is that true? Did I just not say that? There's a lot of pressure. People feel trapped inside systems that have become rigid, heavy, or emotionally disconnected. I've been dealing with some issues with people that have businesses or companies that the culture has gone bad, or the culture of the company is bad. Okay. I can tell you that people are probably living in states where they feel very trapped by the politics of that state. Okay. Actually, I know some people who are moving because of it too. So, when you have the ability to get out, you will. And that is what happens. This can show enforced unity, group pressure, restrictions within communities, or attempts to consolidate power. So even though there are Republicans who disagree with what's going on in this country with gerrymandering, see what I mean about politics? They're like being pressured. Okay. So some other things here. This is Neptune ascendant. Okay. That's confusion, uncertainty, exhaustion. Everyone's feeling it. Misinformation, distorted perceptions, and emotional vulnerability strongly affect public interactions. The vertexual ascendant, which is the VX, okay, when it's involved, it actually means, and I have to go through all this, that events will often feel faded or unavoidable. Well, I got to tell you something, karma led us here. Let's just say we've done terrible things in the past, and we're dealing with some karma, and it's time to straighten that out. Not go backwards and redo it, but literally come out of it and create a better place. There can be dissolving of clarity regarding leadership, direction, or collective identity. Let's not mention the fact that we have a president who's got dementia. and he's a wackadoodle. It is what it is. I have a mother, well, she's like a mother-in-law to me, but I never really got married. I've just been with the same guy for 18 years, but his mother is also going through this. Okay, so this isn't really isolated alone to the government, and also the people having Alzheimer's and dementia is not that unusual when they're 80. It happens in a lot of families. So just think about how that affects you, though. And also not being able to get any help for them because those systems, the infrastructures, are no longer what they used to be. So we have a sun moon equals the ascendant Kronos. Yep, we're still in this one. And there's authority, becomes highly visible. Governments, leadership figures, courts, executives, and institutional power dominate the atmosphere. Well, it does here. Kronos often elevates matters to a natural or global level. This midpoint can describe decisions coming from the top down or public focus on those in positions of control. I think both is happening. We also then have a Hygeia Saturn as we come down. And Hygeia is our well-being, right? So there's health concerns tied to restriction. Aging systems, did I not just say that? Exhaustion, depletion, containment, or structural weaknesses. This can point toward public health discussions, overburdened systems, chronic conditions, or attempts to impose discipline around health matters. Well, we do have a minor, I'm going to call it a minor, epidemic going on with the Havana virus. So that fits. And then this is going to fit the next one as well, okay, which is Hygeia to Cupido. There's that family thing. But also, how does it affect this Republican government because they don't really have a competent person in charge of that particular system? So we have collective health themes. We have public concern about healthcare systems. Environmental health is also when you start talking about data centers, okay? Social well-being or the condition of communities themselves. It can also describe institutional response to health-related issues. So as I move on with this, we get down to Poseidon node. Propaganda at its finest. Okay. But it's also this battle between truth and misinformation. And truth, ideology, belief systems, media narratives, education, religion, and collective messaging becomes central themes. I believe that our negligent press is beginning to realize that independent press is doing quite well with giving us the facts. And I think there are certain things that they're not going to be able to hide or ignore anymore. So I'm hoping that they step up to the plate. We'll see. So as we go on, Poseidon with the node itself often amplifies the spread of information or ideologically across groups and networks. There can be a revelations, there's spiritual rhetoric, propaganda, or competing visions of the truth. And I want to point out that, you know, it talks about Poseidon node, but it's also Poseidon south node, which is how much of this propaganda is oppressing us and not allowing the truth to shine through the way it should. Okay? Well, it's going to come to everyone's attention. Then we get to Poseidon Edemetus, okay, which is interesting in and of itself. Okay, remember that Poseidon is the news, the higher knowledge, and the propaganda, but then Edemetus is the block. It could stop it, it could block it. So here's what it says. Hidden truths slowly emerging. What has been buried, suppressed, stagnant, or ignored may begin to surface now. Edemetus slows and compresses Poseidon's enlightenment principle, often showing truths revealing through limitation, exposure, or unavoidable reality checks. Well, let's talk about how the Democrats are right now holding hearings by themselves with the Epstein survivors. And let's think about this. One of the reasons Trump is very, very upset is because other countries are beginning to do discovery and look into the Epstein files, because it's not just an American issue. That is a world issue. And other countries are doing what they know they need to do to make sure that these survivors get the justice that they should. So then we move on to Aries. Okay, so are we still here, or did we move to the next one? It's hard with me because, okay, so we're looking for, okay, the next one. So let me change this around to 327. 1, 2, 3, 27. Notice Volcanus is right there. So just so that you know, that is a Volcanus then. And Volcanus is in aspect. So I just do want to point that out. I do believe that's where we are. Let me check that for a moment. And I was correct. So as we look at this, now I'm going to go into my next set. And the very first thing that we're going to start with is this Aries Astrea. Okay. And there we have questions of justice, accountability, legality, fairness, and world judgment. These things are now becoming highly public. Astrea often appears when people seek correction, legal balancing, or ethical reckoning. With the Aries point involved, these matters affect the wider world and become highly visible. So there's some, in the Sun Moon midpoint, there are some issues that just can't be ignored anymore. Okay, they've just been ongoing for too long. So if I continue to look at this, you see we have an ascendant with Uranus, and that is public instability, sudden reactions, rebellion. I guarantee you we are on our way to rebellion of some kind. Unpredictability, shocks, rapid changes, disruptions, protest. I expect that we'll all start protesting again, and I am a big protester, so I'll be there. So look out also for some surprising announcements. The collective mood can shift very quickly. It's like this happens already. Tennessee went into an uproar when they got rid of all the black voting districts. What were they thinking? And they reacted immediately. When Virginia's court shot down what the people voted for, I mean, I thought it was a democracy, so people spoke up. I do believe that one's going to move forward, though. I don't think it's going to stay like that. Just FYI, people, my gut was as soon as I heard it, well, it'll go to the Supreme Court. And then they'll have to do what they did with California, which is it'll be okay. So as we move through, it's going to be volatile feeling. It's going to be revolutionary feeling. It's funny because we're not going to do a reconstruction. We're going to do a revolution. And that's a huge difference because with a revolution, that's a lot of Uranus. So Sun Moon also equals the equatorial ascendant with Mercury. And this is public conversations become extremely active. Messaging, media, transportation, communication systems, negotiations, and information exchanges dominate this particular cycle. It can also show nervous energy, scattered thinking, and rapidly changing narratives. Oh, we're beginning a very fun cycle. That's all I'm going to say. Now, with the Sun Moon, you're going to have Hygeia. So Hygeia is going to show up with both the Sun and the Moon, and you can see it here, and I'm going to talk about that right now. So if we look at it with just the Moon, it's emotional health, psychological strain becoming major concerns. Okay, so people are really starting to lose it. People react emotionally to safety, health, caregiving, and survival themes. That's that Ceres coming back in again, too. There is heightened sensitivity regarding protection and security. So you then exchange the Sun and the Moon, right? Leadership directly tied to health, wellness, environmental conditions, or public protection issues. The vitality of the systems themselves become part of the discussion. Well, I don't think I've gone a whole week where I haven't heard about the head of the health department. RFK is wow. And it's not just him. Then we look at our safety, and then you have this Pete guy, and none of them are qualified for their jobs. Nobody is qualified for the jobs they're doing. Right there is almost comical if it wouldn't be so disgusting. Okay, but realize that this is tied into this new moon, which means it's going to affect you even on the most personal levels. I think that this is a case of where sometimes people are just recognizing how bad the upper echelon is of the work environment that they're involved with. Remember, I told you a lot of bad decisions have been made. So then we move on to Saturn, and Saturn is with both the sun and the moon. So we have collective heaviness, emotional fatigue, anxiety, grief, pressure, feelings of limitations, and it reflects the emotional weight of responsibility and the realization that difficult realities have to be confronted. We're in a recession, people. There's a major signature of pressure, accountability, limitation, endurance, and consequences, all because of these bad decisions. Okay, leadership may appear burdened, defensive, or forced into difficult decisions. And I think that when you look at what's happening in the United States, the rest of the world does have to make some very difficult decisions. So it really is, the collective atmosphere right now just feels so serious, restrictive, and even demanding. Okay, I mean, and I'm not blaming any workers, because what I think is happening is they're downsizing. Some people will be out of jobs, other people will be expected to do the work of 3 people. I always say that I'm not sure if I pity the person who was let go, or do I pity the person who stayed, because in all the years that I've done this work, the people who stay at the job and they all think they're the lucky ones, they get to still be there. Yeah, they're there and they're doing the job of 3 people. I don't know. I think maybe they wish they were the ones let go. So then we move on to, basically just summing up what we see. And the overall tone of the new moon is it's a cycle where reality presses hard against denial, and Saturn, Volcanus, and Ceres do not allow avoidance for very long. The charts suggest increased pressure around survival issues, institutions, health systems, economics, leadership, and public accountability. At the same time, Uranus and Poseidon indicate instability mixed with competitive narratives, making truth difficult to separate from distortion until events themselves force that greater clarity. So those that are trying to lie, to cover up everything that and this includes people in positions of authority, maybe even where you work, they're going to try to cover it up. Oh my God, this is terrible, but let's cover it up. It doesn't matter. It's going to backfire. Just like gerrymandering is going to backfire. Careful what you wish for. I love that saying. The Aries point involvement through the structure reinforces these developments, and we're going to see that, okay? That they don't stay isolated. So the Aries point really shows you where it's going to fall apart, okay? So no matter what happens under this new moon, it will become very visible to the larger world. Okay? So some things here to look at are the asteroids. Okay? So before I move into the Aries point, let's just look at the asteroids for a little confirmation on our storyline. Okay. So this is going to make things more dramatic and theatrical. Okay, that was AI's words, not mine. But I got to tell you, my AI always compliments me because of the way I go about astrology and how I use asteroids, because they really do clarify things sometimes. They give us the details. What do they always say? The devil's in the details. Okay. So, a couple of things. Okay. I'm going to talk about something that I had to discuss with the AI. Okay. Realize that I am highly an asteroid astrologer. Okay. It's very important to me. And I study Martha Lang Westcott's work. Now, I know there's a lot of people who do asteroids. Some people have studied with Martha, some have not. That's all I'm going to say about that. So there's going to be varying degrees on any interpretation of an asteroid. Sometimes it expands the meanings, sometimes the meanings are a little different. One of the things that showed up in this axis is this asteroid called Brunetto. Okay, now you could think of people with brunette hair. Okay, yeah, that may have something to do with it. But what it has to do with Martha's work is cremations and fires. And I think that destruction of fires. Okay, so I wanted to stay with that. So me and that old AI had our discussion. And this is I'm sorry about putting a he on him. I don't know what it is. It's AI, right? So no gender. Brunetto, in the work I do, can relate to cremations, burning, fire, destruction through heat, or the aftermath of devastation. It's running conjunct with ornamenta. Okay, ornamenta is a display. It's a presentation. It's decoration. It's not real. Okay? It's like an appearance thing. It's ceremonial staging. You know what Putin just did. Okay? It's designed to be seen. Putin just did it. Okay, so when I say to you, if you follow politics, you have an ace in the hole to study astrology. Okay? But more importantly, it's only May and the fires have started in California. I think it's California. They're out west. I think it's going to be a bad fire year having an air sign Uranus. Okay, so, it's in Gemini. So that's going to definitely make some difference. So another thing that I'm concerned about is explosions and fires caused by war. And, and then somebody trying to tell you that it's related to something else. Okay? So a fire that's made public, destruction that's used symbolically, a staged or highly visible event. All right, now some of the psychic people have been talking about false flags. I'm not going to say anything about that. I'm not a psychic. I'm only going to tell you that I'm an astrologer, and this is what astrology has to say, okay? It's a spectacle surrounding loss or destruction. That's why they say false flags. So I'm not going to say they're wrong. I'm just going to say I'm not really psychic. I'm going to read for you, black and white. That's what I do. Okay, or something's burned for effect, messaging, or exposure. So please be aware to that. Also, Libitina there, which strengthens this considerably because Libitina is tied to death rites, funeral symbolisms, burial processes, tears, public confrontation with mortality or endings. Lutetius is also there, which is interruptions and disruptions, which adds fate, timing, inevitability, or the thread reaching its appointed limit. With Tantalus, now these are all asteroids grouping together, okay? With Tantalus, it introduces deprivation, frustration, unattainable promises, or suffering through withholding. I think they've been withholding the truth, okay? So realize that we already had Saturn, Hygeia, Ceres, Admetus, Kronos, Uranus, and Poseidon all showing up in the midpoints, and those asteroids just magnified it. Okay, so the combination itself suggests not just destruction, but visible pressure placed upon collective systems, public structures, resources, and emotional stability. So we're literally going to probably see industrial accidents, fires, explosions, infrastructure failures, energy resource crisis, ceremonial destructions, highly publicized disasters, or events involving smoke, contamination, cremation, or mass visibility. Because Ornamenta and Make are involved, there's a strong constructive narrative quality here. Make often amplifies survival issues, environmental themes, primitive survival instincts. In other words, you got to remake it, you got to redo it, or unstable collective reactions. Ornamenta can make something look polished, ceremonial, or even performative. Okay, so just that was the AI in agreement with me and how I was reading a particular asteroid lineup. So it says, yeah, that I'm right. So yes, it says. It does compliment me. But I always figure it's a chat box, you know. So, you know, they realize that some of this stuff is going to be a traumatic event used to direct your public attention, destruction presented theatrically. Okay, so it's all about the drama. It's all about the horse and pony show that we've all been dealing with. It's a symbolic burning or an event where spectacle becomes part of the messaging itself. Now, interestingly enough, when Justin Jones in Tennessee was a part of the protest, which he should be, he did burn a Confederate flag, which is so funny because someone I know very close to me had made the comment, I think back when Trump was even elected the first time, that we should have a whole bunch of Confederate flags that we could just light up, that just, and then it goes on fire. So, you know, it's kind of interesting that he did that because it's something that somebody else had already mentioned. The presence of Messenger, Academia, Dreyfus, and Bostrom. Okay, so the Messenger is your messages, what you learn, Academia. Dreyfus is scapegoats, and Bostrom is somebody who talks incessantly. It suggests information surrounding the event becomes important, competing explanations, intellectual debate, investigations, media narrative, and strategic messaging. Okay, or controversy regarding truth interpretation. So it's going to be something that they're going to debate about in the media. So Merlin adds another layer of illusion here. It's manipulation, enchantment, hidden influence, or narrative shaping. Who does that? Combined with Poseidon and Neptune. When you put those two together, people, you can't believe anything you're hearing, right? Or seeing sometimes, which we're now finding out. Already active in this midpoint structure raises the possibility that the perception itself becomes part of the story. Be careful. Achilles is retrograde, so is Hidalgo, which suggests pride's vulnerability, ego wounds. Boy, we got some ego people. Or heroic narratives being revisited or exposed. Achilles often shows a weak point in something that would otherwise appear powerful. I think that's already started. Newt is fascinating, okay, because it's showing the end of this chain, because Newt explains the symbolism toward the sky, overhead conditions, no-fly zones. It's also nighttime or evening, okay? Cosmic environmental themes, protection versus collapse, or events that feel larger than human control. So overall, I would not reduce. So basically what it's saying is that it's not about a literal fire. It could be a literal fire prediction, but the symbolism itself overall also supports things like highly visible destruction, spectacle surrounding crisis, public emotional reaction to that, narrative manipulation on that, on dramatic events that are used symbolically and or politically. Well, we know it's politically in the DC chart because Pallas sat there right at the descendant. And because it's all tied to the sun-moon axis of the Washington, D.C. new moon chart, the symbolism leans strongly toward collective visibility and public impact rather than private or isolated matters. Okay? And so basically, you know, there's a lot of events that are going to occur after sunset. Well, let's just put it this way, that when they pull something for the stock market to make more money for themselves, they do it at night in the darkness. Events occur after sunset. There's a celestial or atmospheric condition, bombing that occurs at night, the visible sky, cosmic environmental forces, or situations unfolding in through the cover of night. When combined with Brunetto and Ornamento, the imagery becomes more striking because fire at night, visible flames. In other words, it's all a spectacle. Spectacle surrounding loss or destruction, or something that is, yeah, let me go. I'm moving on here, guys. It's illuminated destruction. That's what they say. Spectacle against darkness, smoke, fire seen in the sky, or dramatic nighttime visibility. All becoming symbolic expressions. Okay? And it's really visible with Aries Point, Kronos, Poseidon, Messenger, Ornamenta, and Uranus. So Newt can intensify the feeling that something's becoming highly visible against the darkness, literally or metaphorically. There's also an emotional, psychological side here where you have collective anxiety about what hangs over us. It's the fear of the unknown. Things hidden in darkness can then become visible, or events emerging from concealed conditions. When you add Neptune and Poseidon, in this structure, this very active structure, you now have confusion, unclear perceptions, shadowy activity, or shadowy, if you ask me, hidden operations or events where facts remain obscured initially. So yes, it's a really a good way to look at Newt, is what the AI is saying, and that I just broadened its symbolisms when I brought up the meaning of what it meant to me. I'm going to now move on to the Aries point. So I'm going to move on now with the Aries point, and as always, we start by looking first at the midpoints. And I'm going to do the midpoints like I did before. Hopefully I'll be able to catch myself as I'm ready to move to 2230 and 730. And that's the other part of the Aries point. The Aries point is also very public and very volatile. Okay, so the midpoint itself, all right, is really affecting the collective. So even unlike the sun moon, though, which carries heavy compression and psychological strain. And remember, we did have Psyche at the midheaven, and I did point out the psychological he calls it it calls it a strain. I call it wounding. It's emotional wounding that's triggered. Aries point is more active, reactive, and externally visible. So we start with, did I do these even in order? Okay, yeah, Zeus node. I don't know how much they're going to be in order here, guys, so bear with me. Collective activation, mobilization, coordinated action, political alignment, aggressive networking, or organized agendas. Zeus energizes the node into collective momentum. This can describe public movements, strategic alliances, or groups acting with intent and force. So people are organizing, okay? Now, it's bad and it's good because Zeus is not just with the North Node, it's also with the South Node, which means some of these organizations are set out to oppress the public. Some are to strengthen, but you're going to have to decipher the truth. It moves on and it says that there's a compressed force, suppressed anger, pressure building underground. Boy, pressure is building. Blocked energy, which is seeking release. Here's a midpoint that feels it feels like something is being held tightly until it can no longer remain contained. Strategic force operating behind the scenes here is possible. I do believe in my heart of hearts that there are people working for us behind the scenes. I really believe that. The Aries point also equals a Chiron. Here we go, Uranus down there. And here's a disruption through instability, shock, exposure, fractures in systems, sudden awakenings. I want to make a sign that says, wake up. Okay, that's what I want to do. Nervous strain, it's a collective wounding through unexpected events. It often produces situations where instability ultimately reveals vulnerabilities that were already present. So again, you're thinking, oh, you're going along the road, you're going along, no road. The road is gone. The events of having no road, excuse me, the event of having no road is going to make you realize that you had no good construction crew. I mean, it's going to just bring it up. So we're going to see a lot of that. Okay. The Aries point is also running with Mars and Uranus. And I want you to know that Mars and Uranus is the accident combination. Accident, I broke my ankle. Mars, Uranus. Okay. So it's really a Mars, Uranus time right now in the Aries point, which is a lot of separations. And well, I'll read this stuff to you, but please, please be careful of accidents, especially if you are someone who is highly aspected by the Aries point. One of the clear signatures for sudden eruptions, accidents, explosions, violence, rebellion, disruptions, fires, electrical problems, impulsive actions, or rapid destabilization. That's what you can expect. This is a highly reactive and difficult to control once it's triggered. You can't put it back in the box. The Aries point also equals a Volcanus moon, which is a collective, here we go, a collective emotional pressure. The public mood becomes intense, defensive, survival-oriented, and reactive. Okay? It's a strong emotional force that can mobilize populations quickly. It's also a Volcanus sun. So you're not only having a Volcanus moon, you have a Volcanus sun. It is a new moon. Power struggles involving leadership. I think we're already seeing that, to be honest. Authority, government, or dominant personalities. It can show a concentrated force coming from leadership structures or attempts to impose control under pressure. Like putting people under pressure so you can control them, you know? I do believe there are forces within the government working against this leader. Okay, so we'll see what happens, because it's possible that some of it could start to rear its ugly head within the next 4 to 6 weeks. The next one we're looking at is Pluto-Ceres. So this is the transformation of nourishment, taking care. It's the very last one on this line before I go to the next one. And it's transformation that we tie to resources, land, food, economics, caretaking systems, environmental realities, survival structures. Pluto-Ceres often shows deep restructuring involving what sustains people physically and economically. Yes, everybody's growing gardens. Everybody has, we have a garden, but we've had one for a few years. But it's becoming big. Big. People are going to take care of themselves and their neighbors. They're going to grow enough food. They're going to help. And I know that when you have a garden, you do have times where you're inundated with things and you have a choice to either can them, which is what I usually do, or you can give them away. Or can them and then give them away. I've done that too. So that is real. It moves on to Aries point, which is okay, so here we are. Before I get to the equatorial ascendant, okay, so I got to go 5 more. Okay, there it is. There's our Saturn Volcanus. Okay, so our equatorial ascendant is with Apollon. Okay, so what we're looking at is mass communication, widespread dissemination of information. In other words, even when you get information, you have to go through it. Visibly, it's all visible on a global scale. Expansion through media, networks, transportation, or international systems. Like people in this country reading news in other countries so they can get real news. That's happening. What occurs under this axis spreads rapidly and widely. So we also have with this Aries point Hygeia volcanis, which is public health pressure. So because of the public health issues, there's going to be a lot of pressure. The environmental strain, physical exhaustion, health crisis under pressure. And the fact that we don't have a good health system right now, and we do have an epidemic, is going to be an issue. I'm just saying. Okay, so there's an intense focus on protection and containment, and that is true. I have seen that. So we've already seen that. So we move on. So that was our Hygeia volcanis, okay? So right there, okay, right there. I know everything is on here because I checked. So then we move on to Saturn volcanis. This is our guarding, very guarded energy. Saturn volcanis is to be on guard. And it's extremely important. This is a controlled force, yes, because Volcanus is, with Saturn, it would be controlled. It would be controlled. Restriction under pressure, structural stress, suppression, military police energy, hard enforcement, okay? Or systems pushed beyond, hold on, I don't even know where I am. There we go. Beyond endurance. When this midpoint appears prominently, events tend to feel heavy, consequential, and difficult to reverse. And I think a lot of us are in that. Aries point is very strongly connected to Astrea. See right here, this is Astrea right here. Okay, so just to let you know, which is legal, judicial, moral, ethical, and accountability themes will become central. The public demands this. They demand justice. They demand the correction, and they really want things to be balanced here on this earth plane. So when you add this to, here we go, to things like Zeus, because it sits there. Okay, I'm thinking about where is Zeus? Zeus is also, now this is Astrea, which I told you it was. Zeus is down here, so I'm not quite sure why it was. Oh, it's picked up because of the nodes. There it is. It's picked up because of the nodes. So there's a lot of connection in here, okay, with Zeus. That's why. I was going to say why. Realize what Zeus is. Force, ignition, aggression. Ignition because it's the seed of, okay? Directed energy, it is always directed, and it's very controlled. Directed energy, aggression, weapons, political agendas, heat and fire symbolisms, and intentional action. When it's running with Ophelia, I already pointed that out, okay? It's an Ophelia Zeus in the Aries point. That's what it is, because Ophelia is up in here. And so we go back to here, which is our let me go back, our Aries point, they connect. Okay, that's why. So we are then emotionally overwhelmed. We're thinking about all the tragedy, the instability, the grief, the psychological collapse, and just really overall collective vulnerability. We are so vulnerable. That's what we feel like. We're really not. We have to believe we have the power. I do believe that's coming. I believe this is the beginning of that. Kronos, which is the asteroid in this case, reinforces the elite authority, the high-level visibility, leadership structures, governments, and those operating above ordinary circumstances. Abundantia and price, which is retrograde, immediately pull economics right into our story. So even though this is the Aries point and we're looking at DC's chart, all of these things affect the world, the markets, the resources, the inflation, the value systems, the wealth imbalance, which is probably the worst it's ever been, and supply issues or debates over what something truly costs. Like, for example, oil costs X amount per barrel. We're all paying like $4.55, $5 plus whatever, depending on where you live. And yet, when the prices of the barrel were the same at another point in recent history, we were running at least $2 less a gallon. So I don't think we're really looking at this thing right. I think when those truths come out, people are really going to start questioning the gouging that's going on, where a company like Shell can make 24% profits. What? Okay, so just again, this stuff is coming up. Williams is particularly notable because, as you've observed in prior work, it can manifest self-destructive tendencies, reckless behavior, or actions that undermine the stability from within. Yes, because I am very strict about how AI uses Williams. Because the way I use Williams is it's self-destructive. That's the way I was taught with Martha's work. And it works really well with Finney, who it happens to be running with, which is endings, completion, finality, exhaustion, to end something. The situation has now reached its limits. Then you've got Scapula, which reinforces the Hygeia, which we've been talking about with the sun-moon axis, which is, here we go again, healing, medicine, intervention, treatments, attempts to repair, okay, damages, okay? So we're, trying to deal with what's here. Tisphany retrograde, like the measles. Okay, just had to say that. Tisphany retrograde is extremely sharp with this axis, the Aries point, because it's one of the Furies. It carries the theme of vengeance, retaliation, punishment, moral outrage, retribution, consequences. Okay, it's like justice coming in. Okay. And it's retrograde, which intensifies the karmic repetition or unfinished collective grievances that are coming back to the surface. Clotho retrograde suggests threads being rewoven, timelines being altered, but because it's retrograde, okay, it's in its retrograde action, I should say, it's the reversal of beginnings, or its attempts to restart or redirect destiny paths that are already in motion. Things, turnarounds. I've said it over and over again. I've said it with football games. I just had a phone call from a client. Major turnarounds in their life because of something happening. Okay, so expect the unexpected. Tisphany is here. Clotho is here. Okay. Varda is also retrograde. It's strong. Its ties in very strongly with truth, vision, illumination, or revelation. In its retrograde form, it's still truth, but they're hidden and they begin to emerge slowly. And it results in the understanding that we've just delayed clarity. Okay. Arachne symbolizes networks, entanglements, webs, manipulation, digital systems, conspiratorial thinking, and situations becoming increasingly tangled and interconnected. Because Arachne, one of the best ways to use it, if you ever see it in a chart, is sew, knit, crochet. Okay, that's another way to use it. Okay. Nemesis reinforces accountability. It also talks about downfalls through excess and corrections, where we have to balance things again. And it's about consequences catching up with individuals and systems. Yeah, you made bad decisions. Now you're going to start to feel the results of those bad decisions. Melipene tells you that it's getting worse. It's getting so bad that the public it's like public tragedy, grief, dramatic events, and it's collective mourning or emotionally charged narratives presented on a public stage. Astrea, here again, reinforces justice, legality, and moral reckoning. Born, which is born again, or it's like another, we look at born as like another ascendant, but it's on the Aries point, which can mean an emergence, the beginning of a new phase, or something coming into existence through a crisis. Because of events, because of the crisis, we begin to see, wait a minute. And that begins an emergence of a new thing. Okay. Machiavelli is in here too. And it is really revealing of what is happening. And you think about Machiavellian behavior. Okay. So there's strategic manipulation, political calculations, hidden agendas, technical narrative control, power games, and leadership's acting through strategy rather than transparency. I'm just like sitting here speechless because I can't make this up. I couldn't put this better, what we're living through. Wow. When you combine this with Mars, Uranus, Saturn, Volcanus, Zeus, Tisphany, Nemesis, and Machiavelli all together, it's an axis that strongly suggested to us visible power struggles, engineered narratives, public tension, reactive collective emotions, and consequences that emerge from strategic or forceful actions. This new moon feels less quiet and more like a turning point, I do believe, where pressure becomes visible. The Aries point itself suggests events quickly becoming public, international, and emotionally charged. Apparently, the Americans will not be the only people on the street. There is both a genuine instability and the possibility of a calculated response to the instability that will operate simultaneously. Wow. I couldn't make it up if I tried. I couldn't put it better if I tried. And all I can say is hang on, hold on, the end is near. Okay? And that's even in your personal life, guys. That's like you're going to be able to find that way. That game is going to do a turnaround. And with that said, I wish you all only happy readings till we meet again. And if you would, share, like, especially the comments, and comment on what you have here. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your support of this channel.